And welcome everybody to the Nooner. I'm Dave LaMont, and I've got my beautiful Central Florida background here today. You can tell that I'm not home, and I appreciate you tuning in. We use the natural light here, and it's a little bit overcast right now in the Orlando area, but certainly not overcast if you're a Miami Heat fan. But I began the show with a bit of unfortunate breaking news. About 45 minutes ago, it was reported that FAU's opener against Georgia Southern has been postponed. It was supposed to be tomorrow, broadcast on ESPN, but 11 players, according to the Sun-Sentinel, have tested positive, 11 people in the FAU program, may not all be players, have tested for the coronavirus, and that means a postponement. Just a couple of days ago, we had a postponement involving North Carolina. Their game against the University of Charlotte was postponed when Charlotte ended up having too many positive tests. It's not surprising this is happening on college campuses. We talked about this before. There are enough brainless boobs out there on college campuses, even though they are most undoubtedly distance learning in almost every case that I know of anyway. But there are enough people who still aren't taking it seriously among the younger population that there's still big parties, there's still social opportunities where people are not wearing masks or not socially distancing, and it is spreading at times. Now, that's about as much of a doctor expert conversation as I care or am qualified to have, but I think this is going to be an issue in the college game. The NFL has gotten off to a good start. We had a bunch of players who opted out to be safe, and I think we're going to have a couple guys in the NFL, and I'd say that in very generically, pop up as a little positive. That's going to happen. But when you have 11, some of them could be in your traveling party, by the way, but still, it's enough for FAU to postpone the game. The two schools are looking for a new date. Meantime, college basketball, they do have the hard start date of November 25. Are they going to attempt in the conferences some sort of bubble, or are they going to wing it? Depending on the distance between the schools, you could do a day trip, bus them in, bus them out, clean the bus while the game is being played on, and have it completely sanitized for the bus trip back. You're going to get a lot of that this year. That way you don't have to worry about a hotel, and you don't have to worry about paying for the hotel, because this stuff costs. Even if you get a deal by bringing in 20 people on your traveling party and get hotel rooms for a bargain, it is going to cost. So I fully expect college basketball is headed in that direction. As far as bubbles go, it's a little early yet. I know there's some preliminary talk about the Big East, but let's just wait that one out. I think it's too soon. I wanted to give you guys something a little bit more intelligent about the Heat and the Celtics game 2 last night before we bring our guest, Larry Blustein, in to talk about high school football in South Florida and obviously the pandemic impact on that and around the state. But before we talk to Larry, I watching some of that game. I was also watching, by the way, did you see Joe Burrow last night? So far, you can't help but be impressed. Now, I'm not ready, he's not going to be an all-pro and he's not going to the Hall of Fame after 2 years. But the dude threw just about 60 passes last night, never got sacked, and he was under a lot of pressure. And it showed the ability of making intelligent throws. And sometimes the intelligent throws are the ones that go 50 feet into the bleachers. All right? Sometimes the intelligent throws are incompletions. I was impressed. I'm going to keep an eye on this guy because so far, the very preliminary returns are positive. Anyway, back to the Heat-Celtics. So I thought, well, I need some help on this. So I went to two people I implicitly trust and who know what the heck they're talking about, my kids. I've got one who's a graduate assistant at Texas Tech, another one who's at University of Wyoming on scholarship. So I'm going to read off my phone some of the things they told me between the two of them, Drake and Drew. The one thing that Drew pointed out in the third quarter, Duncan Robinson on the court, the pick and roll is a lot harder to guard because his man is the tagger on the roll. So it's a 4-on-4 game now. And both my boys mentioned the disaster for the Celtics when the Heat switched to zone. And I found a stat that when the Heat played zone, they held the Celtics, or the Celtics were 0.78 per possession in that zone. That is awful. They scored 25 points on 32 possessions against the zone defense. That is less than a free throw per possession. All right? So the other thing that the boys pointed out to me to tell you all is that Miami will extend that zone. That just means they push it out farther. So they will run guys off the line, and they make sure they hit their rotations. So it makes it look like shots were there that weren't. All right? And the Celtics didn't try to get inside and play inside out. In other words, throw it in, throw it back out. That's one way to combat a zone. Another one is to go into the middle. Even I know that. It screws with Jason Tatum, according to Drew. It takes Tatum out of his game. He is an isolation player, and you can't isolate in a zone. I did not know that. Drake wanted to know why Stevens didn't make a quarter-by-quarter adjustment. Brad Stevens, the Celtics coach. He says Eric Spoelstra outcoached him and stifled him. That is, yes. And the other thing they both wanted me to tell you is that Goran Dragic might be the MVP of this team at the moment. Now, Jimmy Butler is a guy who doesn't have to have shots, and if you look at his box score, it's relatively pedestrian. But even I noticed he made two of the biggest defensive plays of the game in the fourth quarter that led to 4 important points. But the problem is, and the boys pointed this out, that Dragic gets switched on to big players. So that puts, believe it or not, the smaller player at the advantage because he can do a blow-by, just go right by them for layups. Or if he wants to drive and then hit somebody open in the corner. So there you go. That is an intelligent analysis, way better than I could have done. So I want to thank my guys for that. Very much appreciate all of their help. And I knew I could count on them. I didn't even bother asking, are you watching the game? I just said, can you give me a little something extra I can bring to the audience? So there you go. You got no charge for that service. No charge to subscribe on YouTube, by the way. Join me on Twitter, Dave Lamont1, Instagram at Dave Lamont. And let's bring him in. I am a graduate of Fort Lauderdale High School. Larry was actually at Fort Lauderdale High's first football game around 1919, I believe, the oldest school in Broward County. Larry probably saw the first Flying L's Stranahan Dragons game. But when look, if you want to talk about high school football anywhere in the South Florida, and probably the entire state, Larry is your source, has been for decades. He appears with Joe Rose. He is on with my friend Ed Berliner on his show. And I've known Larry since about the time I graduated high school, actually. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me in. And, I maybe the second game of the Lauderdale Stranahan series. that 1919 is kind of pushing it a little bit. But, and nevertheless, the longest rivalry in Broward County, Stranahan and Lauderdale. And yeah, and you know what? Fort Lauderdale has always maintained, they've always had never the greatest football teams, but they've always put out kids, Rod Carter type guys. And,
right.
They've had people throughout the years. But tell you what, it's been a really frustrating couple of months, but football's back in some form. And that's, as you mentioned, when Ed and I get on, it's more like we're throwing darts at people. So,
well, you can do what you want. That is your decision as to what you're throwing around. But the reason I wanted you on this weekend is because you say in some form. So I think for those who and I do have some folks who watch him out of state, as per usual, the state of Florida is divided. We seem to be divided on everything in the state except Publix grocery stores, which we're all united on, strangely. And the better Cuban sandwiches are in Miami. Let's talk first about, let's cut the state in half and let's go West Palm Beach and up. Let's say I'm in the Orlando area right now. As the North public schools, are they going? And the Panhandle as well?
Yeah, well, some of the now Pensacola is kind of going to be set back a few weeks because of the hurricane that went through and did extensive damage to Escambia County and in that area. I talked to a lot of people up in that area, but for the sake of playing, they're basically up and running and throughout the Panhandle, in the North Florida, in the Jacksonville. It's just the Orlando area. What happened is, and everybody will tell you, they went back way too fast, and they were trying to keep up with the Joneses, and it didn't work because you've had 3 or 4 schools that have now had a quarantine since they've been back. Same thing with Vero Beach, same thing with Lakeland, and I would imagine we're a long way from, looking at Tampa and some of the other areas, Dave, that are going to, because all it takes is one support staff like a water girl or a reserve defensive back to get it, and the entire team you played are in quarantine for 14 days. So it's been a stop and start thing. But the whole thing, I believe, starts and stops with the FHSAA and the governing body of athletics in the state of Florida. And they made a huge mistake. And I'm not going to mince words that they really divided this state to a point where they could have easily said everybody is going to start November 1. Okay, that's the way it's going to be. I don't care if you have basketball. I don't care if you have wrestling. We're in a pandemic like we've never seen before. It's a once-in-a-lifetime type of deal. I mean, for the very fact that we're all breathing and being able to come out and practice and play is the one thing that you have to look at and say, thank goodness. So that's what I would have done. Because then you would have put everybody in the mix. Now you're having teams that are either opting in or opting out. And certainly if you opt in to play in the playoffs, let's look at South Florida, for instance. Broward County, Dade County, Palm Beach will start this coming Monday conditioning. They have not been together since March as a team. Now, these other teams have been through the condition phase. They've been through the practice phase, and now they're playing games. So what it means is you're talking the 21st of September, you have to condition for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That means, that you split up into groups, you do your weightlifting, you do your running, you do your cardio, you get back into some sort of shape to even get a practice going. Then you have that 1 week of practice that you're just going to be in a helmets and shoulder pads only. And then that final week, which you're going to put on some pads, you're going to start hitting. So you're talking a month. So what's going to happen is Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach will start their football seasons on October 30th. Now, if you opt in to the playoffs, they start November 4th, 13th. So that's 3 weeks later. So all you have is if you opt in, let's say you're the teams, I'll give you the teams that are opting in. Deerfield Beach, St. Thomas, Cardinal Gibbons, Broward County, Dade County, you have your traditional powers, Northwestern, Central, Booker T. Washington, and Christopher Columbus, all defending state champions. And rightfully so. So that means that the rest of the teams in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, what they're going to do is they're going to start their season on October 30th and go right through. They're going to play right through the playoffs. So they'll end up with 8 games, which is smart for them because they're doing it. I mean, under the circumstances, I think they're doing it for the right reason. You're going to give the kids, especially the seniors who have nothing right now, an opportunity. Now, let's say Booker T. Washington opts in. Their first round game is against Gulliver Prep, who was the #1 seed. They get beat. They played 3 games. To me, that's where the FHSAA kind of hung themselves, because now if you opt in, and why wouldn't you opt in if you're a defending state champion? You want to give your kids an opportunity to defend that state championship. So I'm only picking Booker T because maybe Booker T, of all the teams that have opted in South Florida, would be on the shakiest ground of going real far. They lost a bunch of kids. They lost 2 kids to IMG Academy that were really vital. So it makes no sense to me. So now if you rewound and went back to August when they had these high-level meetings in Gainesville, and the director would, jump the board and say, listen, I don't care what you vote on. We paid good money for somebody to come in here from a scientific standpoint and tell us the ramifications of playing. They came back with the studies that we shouldn't be playing until October. You dismissed that for some crazy reason. So what it comes down to, Dave, is the leadership is really not leadership in the FHSAA, because if it was that the director, who's making pretty good money and will have his job no matter if they play or not, should have stepped up and said, listen, this is what's going to happen. I'm making a decision right now. The board's going to have to go with me on this. We're starting for everybody. We're not just going to open it up for Weewahitchka and Bluntstown and Madison County on August the 31st or whatever was the date that they let them start. But we're going to do this for Miami-Dade. We're going to do this for Orange. We're going to do this for Hillsborough on November 1st. Everybody starts on November 1st. You condition for 2 weeks. We get this thing going by the middle of November, Thanksgiving. You play throughout November, December. You have your state championships in the early part of January. Now, if the kids want to go in early, like St. Thomas has, well, they can't go in early anyway because St. Thomas doesn't have that program. But let's say you're a public school
right.
that has kids that could go in January the 4th to University of Wisconsin. So those kids are going to go anyway. They already got their, why do they have to play that extra year? I mean, they really don't have to. From a safety standpoint, they're already good enough to have been awarded scholarships. They walk on. And that's what I say. These people are bitching and moaning to the point, especially the basketball wrestling people that say, listen, my kid's not going to get a chance to play. Is he going to play football or not? If he's going to play football for a scholarship, then this thing shouldn't even matter. Basketball's nice. If you're a senior, you've already played it for 3 years. Okay. Evidently, you're not going to use your son, Wyoming, as, on a scholarship. What you're doing is you're looking for football. So kind of put that in the background, which they didn't want to do. They kept bringing up, my kid's not going to be able to do this. And that's where my sticking point is. They should have started this thing November 1st, where Dayton, Broward, and Palm Beach wouldn't have to opt in, opt out. They would have had their 8 games, 9 games, and still been able to play for a state title, been on the even ground. So what you've done is you pissed off a lot of people in South Florida, people who have a lot of clout, and people who kind of make, the Luther Campbells of this world. And you could say whatever, people could say whatever they want about Luther Campbell. But at the end of the day, he's for the kids. He's busted his tail. He's made a career in rap, but he's a football coach. He loves the sport, but he goes to bat for the kids all the time. And that he was one of them. He's in Alberto Carvalho's ear because they're friends. And even that didn't work. So, you got to give these guys credit for trying. But now the FHSAA it's their onus. It's on them what happens the rest of the way. And certainly if, one of these teams that opt in gets knocked out in the first round, I guess it's on them. But like I said, you can't disagree, Dave. If you were a defending state champion, you can't deprive your kids of repeating or defending their crown.
Having that opportunity. That's fair. Now, the other thing we need to point out to folks in South Florida is that there's football this weekend. The private schools are starting, and there's a big matchup with a Chaminade Madonna and American Heritage. And American Heritage went from a 5-game schedule, and they're up to 8 now, including St. Thomas, by the way, in November at St. Thomas. Let's talk a little bit about the difference there. How is it that the private schools are able to do this and not the public schools?
Well, we started last week, which was a pretty good game. You had 2 defending state champions, Champagnat Catholic, which is a defending 2A state champion, against Chaminade Madonna, a 3-time state champion. Great game, to open up the season. The reason they could do that is they don't have anybody to answer to. They have smaller schools. And I don't have to tell you about America.
Right there.
Yeah. Well, I don't have to tell you about American Heritage. I mean, all your kids went there, so you know the structure of that school. So when you take into consideration that they're not as big as schools, so obviously their student body, and they can control things where you can't really control in a public environment. Private, you're paying to go there. They call all the shots. They have the rules. And, certainly it got to the point with a lot of these private schools, and if you're paying $30,000 a year for each kid to go to school, which if you go to Heritage or Pinecrest or any of those schools, you just don't have one kid. You've sent 3 and 4 and 5 kids through that program. You don't want them sitting at home on a computer while you're paying $30,000 to go to that environment.
Let's point out, and I'm still on the faculty at American Heritage too, so let's add that in there for people who may not know. That's as soon as I realized there was a game, that's why Larry's name popped in immediately, because we were actually getting started, and the game is tonight.
Right.
What American Heritage has done, and I cannot speak for any other private school, but the students for girls volleyball and for football are not allowed to learn on campus during their seasons. So they are distance learning required. Now, after 5 o'clock, they're on campus doing what they, whatever training is necessary.
Sure.
And other sports in the Heritage catalog will do this also. Wrestling, for example, another obvious contact sport.
Yeah.
When the wrestlers will not be allowed to come on campus and learn with their fellow students. And what is happening at Heritage and other private schools is you have a combination of students who have stayed home and decided to distance learn, and a much smaller population has decided we're going to go ahead and learn face-to-face, and the school has been set up. And you're right. They are in complete control. I'll give you another example, and this is just an example of control. I'm involved with the broadcast program there. They had, a couple of days ago, they had two things. They've just opened a new weight room and a new locker room for football, and they have a brand new gym. And the girls volleyball team was going to be the first team to ever utilize that for a practice. We wanted to send some of our students to get some interviews and some video. The problem we had, and I never thought of this, is some of those students had been to school already in person, and they weren't allowed to be there to mingle with the students who weren't, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
so we had to find a couple of students who had distance learned and send them in.
Oh, okay.
And I get that. I'm not criticizing that at all. I understand the policy. They kind of don't want, as they would say in Ghostbusters, the streams to cross.
No, I understand.
That goes to your point of control, that a public school, and I'm sure you've kept
they could never do that. No,
the crazy, intense, passionate debate in the public schools where we live is, should teachers be allowed to opt out? What are the health threats if teachers are going to be forced or should be forced back? And that is, that is a national story, not just one that is going on locally.
Well, you saw what happened earlier, not to interrupt, but
go ahead.
A couple of days ago that when Broward County made their decision for the teachers to come back on October 5th, they did it for everybody, and for those teachers who weren't going to come back, they'd have to take a leave of absence.
I know, that's
which
crazy.
Kind of is a slap in the face to these people who have busted their tail since last April to try to give these students the best educational experience they can via an online experience. But wow, what a slap in the face to tell these teachers. And there's a lot of teachers who are at kind of 3, 4, 5 years left that are in their 50s and the 60s, and they're compromised as far as their health, and they're really it's really not a fair situation. And even for the younger people who may have kids and parents that are living with them, you're putting them in a tough situation too.
It's awful. And I understand in a pandemic we didn't have a playbook beforehand, so we are ad-libbing our way through. But I'm with you. Don't let the door hit you on your way out attitude from the school board, and particularly the chief of staff, the superintendent, I think was the one who had that quote that, man.
Robert Runcie,
Well, Runcie's superintendent, but I think it was the chief of staff who had that quote that was close to that, basically to paraphrase, don't let the door hit you on your way out. Nice. It's been nice having you. We'll find somebody else. Like, come on, man. Have, an eighth of a cup of compassion. You've talked quite a bit about state titles. How is this going to work, though? I mean, I have to question the legitimacy of these state titles. If these northern and central teams or western teams are going to have a full season or 3/4 of a season under their belts, and you mentioned some of these others that may only play 2 or 3 games and then whoomp.
Yep. Welcome to the playoffs.
Are these legit?
You know what? The South Florida people don't care. I know it sounds harsh, but they don't care. We'll play you behind Denny's if you want. That's their attitude.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the northern people have all the excuses, to be honest with you. You take a central or northwestern, the adversity that a lot of those kids grow up in, this is nothing. So if they have to play 4 or 5 games and jump into the playoffs, so be it. They're ready for it. I mean, they just didn't want to be left out. And I know it sounds trite, and on the internet, and all these little private chats that I go into and stuff, the big thing is everybody's consumed with that $55 trophy. That's what everybody is consumed with. They could not care less. See, to me, I think if you played Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and you had a championship at the end, and let's say Thomas went against Northwestern, and Heritage went against Central, and Cardinal Gibbons went against Booker T, and on, you'd have probably more interest, you'd have more attendance, you'd have more validity, because who wants to go to a game where Miami Central is scoring 67 points against Pensacola Escambia? I mean, they didn't even come close to doing that during the season with any of the teams in South Florida. So that's why I'm saying it didn't really phase South Florida, other than the fact that their egos are larger than than life, and that's the thing that well, South Florida
Yes.
people, they don't care. They just want. I mean, it's all about winning and not developing but winning. They figure, like Roland Smith, one of the greatest people on earth, University of Miami grad, went to Northwestern, guy that I talk to 4 times a week, one of the utmost professional people in the world. And here's a guy that, even though there was a pandemic going on, every conversation I had, he was so confident that they would play for a state title. He would ride his bike 30 miles a day. He would, just go on with life. And there was never a doubt with him. Never a doubt with Max Edwards from Northwestern. Never a doubt from the Booker T. Washington people. They always knew that it was going to come down, that when, no matter if they had, like, you're playing one game and then we're starting to play. Okay, bring it on. That's that's the way they're geared. These people are geared like that. You do that to somebody from, Jacksonville or Tallahassee, and they panic and, we got to play 7 games. See, there's no excuses in South Florida. They come to play. That's why, they win 7 of the 8 state titles last year. And yeah, there was a couple that could have gone either way, like the St. Thomas, Orlando, Edgewater. But I look at Orlando a lot like us, because it's a big metropolis, over 1 million people in the area and growing, as all the time. And their coach is a lot like ours. Their players are a lot like ours. Tampa the same way. And that's why they figured all along, we're going to just see what South Florida does. And that's what everybody's done. Now that, even though Venice isn't so happy that St. Thomas is getting back in it, because every year, that St. Thomas usually ends their dream for the year. That's just the way it is. The one thing that I think that St. Thomas and Cardinal Gibbons are finding out, that American Heritage is long understood, is that when you have to start scheduling your games and not having the BCAA do it, it's a different life. I mean, how many people other than, even I'm surprised that Pat Surtain has stepped up to play St. Thomas, because, it's not exactly the first question that you're going to have people raising their hands when they go, who wants to play St. Thomas?
Right. I agree, because they have been thrashed by St. Thomas, and they've had good teams be thrashed by teams that would go on to either make the state finals or actually win the darn thing. But St. Thomas is that good, which kind of leads me to another thing. We haven't even mentioned the R word yet, and that, of course, is recruiting. And my guest, if you don't know, Larry Blustein, LarryBlustein.com, longtime observer of the high school football scene in South Florida. How does all of this, shortened seasons, all of this stuff, do you think impact, because there is, and folks know this already, but I'll repeat it, a laughable, insane amount of college talent on these campuses from stem to stern in Florida. How is recruiting affected?
The marginal kids are affected. The kids who, maybe, because here's the thing. And when you, at first, when I say it to you, you'll go, oh, and then you'll think, but the last time that these kids in these classes were seen live by these college coaches, 10 months ago. 10 months. So in that 10 months, you as a father of boys know the growth that you could do in 10 months. So that kid that you looked at last November and said at 5'9", 180, go, if he was 6'2", 220, well, he is now 6'2", 220. So those are the guys that you have to, if you're a college coach, you have to, because however, there's no other way you could have found out. There was no spring, which is vital. So vital. No summer, which is even more important, because you get these kids, and from basketball, through AAU and all that, you get these kids on your campus to play. And once you do that, like Nick Saban made a career out of getting South Florida kids, because he looked at Jerry Jeudy and he saw, Amari Cooper when they were
Patrick Tan Jr.
Yeah, exactly. All those guys like that, they would come to the camps and they go, oh, wait a minute now, and Alabama's not a team that's going to come to South Florida and get 20 kids. They're just going to get 2 or 3 each year. But those 2 or 3 are going to be, like this year, they went and got Ja'Cory Brooks, who went from Booker T. Washington. He's at at IMG Academy. They got Dallas Turner, who was at American Heritage, and now is at St. Thomas. And you talk about basketball player. Here's a kid that on a Tuesday night he drops 30 for American Heritage. On Wednesday he's enrolled at St. Thomas. So it's awfully tough. Because people are trying to sell these kids on, oh, well, we're playing for a national title. And somebody like Dallas Turner, this kid's a big time athlete. I mean, he could play basketball. If he really concentrated on playing basketball, he could have done that. Really emerged as a great football. I watched his dad play at Miami Carroll City, great basketball player back in his day. So that's what you have. It's hurting the marginal kids, the kids who were like, the last time you saw them were 5'9", 175. Now they're 5'11", 6 foot and into the 200 range. So those kids now get an opportunity to play 3, 4, 5 games. And then all of a sudden Louisville or one of the, there he is. Okay. We'll start putting them down. Those are the kids, because this next cycle, the class of 22, which are current juniors, and 23, which are current sophomores. I think the pandemic will be under enough control that we'll be able to have 7-on-7s. We'll be able to have, the spring next, in May, and we'll be able to have summer camps where, all these, from Florida all the way to Mississippi, and they take tours. That's the greatest thing, is these kids will jump on a bus with, a couple of coaches. Their parents give them, a couple $100 to go, for room and board and some meals, and they'll take them to all these to the campuses, and they'll get to see the schools, but not at the same time. The college coaches will be able to eyeball the kids. That's what has been missing from this cycle, but it'll return. I think, I feel strongly enough that we'll have this pandemic under enough control that, we could do those things, come this next cycle. But to answer your question, yeah, the recruiting is being affected greatly because of the fact, and that's why you're seeing the University of Miami's commitments for 2021. 92% of them are from Florida, from Orlando down. And
pretty good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea because, finally, things are playing in the Manny Diaz's hands. So if he wins, he could strike while that iron's hot, and he can continue that. They're doing it now out of the necessity that mom and dad would like, they say to Junior, okay, Ohio State's nice and all that, but to keep you home here and you're still playing Power 5 and, you're playing really good, football, and they're always watching Miami, I would take Miami for now. So maybe that will help them, even though the urgency to stay home is going to lessen, as we move away from this pandemic. So I think that answers the question. It's because of what's going on now, but the marginal kids need this more than anything.
Last question for you, Larry, and I started the show by mentioning that FAU and Georgia Southern had to cancel their game. We lost a game that was going to be in Chapel Hill with Charlotte and UNC. How comfortable are you with high schools playing football right now?
Okay, well, I've been to a few games so far, and I'm probably the only one because I've been upstate, and I was at the IMG Venice game last night. In fact, I was in Port St. Lucie watching Treasure Coast, and actually saw Nick O'Leary as a coach at South Fork High School. Saw him last night. I think the way they're doing it is good. The kids are. The kids will be kids, so, but I think from the fan standpoint and at games, they've done it the right way. They don't do a lot of contact during the course of a week. I think they only hit one time. So they're being as diligent as possible, from a safety standpoint. I talked to Pat Surtain and Darryl Porter, and they're always they're making sure that their support staff they're always having clean this, clean that. You have a lot of hand sanitizers, always washing your hands. Nobody's using the same water bottles. You have to do those things, and they're taking every precaution possible. In a perfect world, you say, let's just cancel everything and that'll be it, and then we'll worry about it next year. But when you make a decision, or I make a decision like that, you're messing with people's lives. And you know what? If you could do this safely, and I don't know what safely is, because I'm sure Vero Beach and Lakeland thought that they were doing things safely, and all of a sudden they started, and now I think Lakeland's coming back this week and Vero Beach next week. It's the only way you can do it. If you're going to play this game, do it. They're having limited, like on tonight's game, they only were making tickets available to parents from Chaminade into American Heritage, because last week was almost like so cruel to watch the parents outside the stadium looking in at Chaminade, seeing their own kids who they spent all their lives ushering the practice and being there for and spending money for camps and stuff, and they supported them wholeheartedly, and then it's game time and you got to be outside. So I think the people at Chaminade recognized that last week, and they'll distance them, believe me. And last week they had the media back and far enough where they were away from the kids. So, and that's the only thing you can do, Dave, is you can try to do the best you can. And I think these people are under such pressure at every place I've been to perform at the utmost and be as safe as you can, that they're going overboard. But that's good. That's a good thing.
I'd rather be doing that. Where can people keep up with you? Either websites, any pages? Where can people find your information?
Well, LarryBlustein.com is our website for South Florida, for Dade, Broward County. We have an overload of information. Any kid, we have about 190 profiles up. We have team profiles. And then we have a Florida. It's PrepZoneFlorida.com. It's a statewide deal that we started this year. It's really working out so well because we got everybody throughout the entire state. Every Monday we're on 6 to 8 with our WQAM show, and we're so excited that we got some really good sponsors, because that's the one thing you find out maybe in high school rather than college pro, or as everybody knows, trying to get advertising in radio is just it's very tough. But these people believe in enough with the kids that they want to advertise and help support. So that's a good thing for us. And at LarryBlustein.com on Twitter, or Larry Blustein on Twitter. Same thing with Facebook. We're on Instagram at OurBoy, BLU, no E, BLU. Right. And so a lot of ways you can get a hold of me. If you have questions, if you have kids to push, we do everybody. Where the rivals and scouts and 247s are consumed with the 5 and 4 stars, we don't care. Everybody wants to play football. You got to push them out there. They work just as hard, may not be as talented, but there's a place for everybody. And I'm sorry Charlotte, North Carolina is not playing, because Charlotte's worked so hard not to be the little stepchild in that state for a long time.
And North Carolina could be very good this year too. They flexed against Syracuse and FAU. They were sailing along. That Conference USA was never even hinted they weren't going to play, and now they face a setback with one of their premier teams. The Willie Taggart era is going to have to wait at least a week. I just hope that the cases are not serious, and I still have a few relationships over there at FAU, so I'm hoping that none of the people I know are involved. Larry, I cannot thank you enough. I think people have got an idea of the depth of your passion if they didn't know it, which fortunately I am blessed to know that. But thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Well, can't wait to get you back on ESPN all the time and watch you.
Yeah, same here. I agree with that. Thank you very much, Larry Blustein. Wrapping up today's Nooner. That'll do it until Monday's Nooner, and I haven't figured out who to talk to yet, but I got a weekend to think about it. But again, the YouTube subscription is absolutely free. So please join in as much as you can. For my guest, Larry Blustein from LarryBlustein.com, I'm Dave LaMont. Have a safe and pleasant weekend. Enjoy if you decide to tune into that Chaminade Heritage game. It ought to be a good one, and it is streaming. I just don't know the source. You can dig it up if you want it. Yeah, we'll find it. Take care, everybody. Thanks.